May I have your attention, please? Shalom, everyone. My name is Yisrayl Hawkins. I'd like to serve forever as a priest starting very soon. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services.
May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is son of Yisrayl Hawkins, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's a privilege and honor to present to you the sons and daughters of Yisrayl now entering the sanctuary. And now I present one of the sons of Yisrayl, son of Yisrayl, Deacon Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. My title is The Power of Satan. Satan has a lot of power to make your life miserable. If you allow it to affect you. We are told in Daniel 7:25 that we will be mentally attacked to cause us to fall away. She has the power to deceive and lie, but you don't have to listen. Please turn to 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 8, page 931. And it says, and then that lawless one will be revealed. Yeshua will remove with the breath of his mouth and make powerless with the appearance of his coming, whose coming is according to the energy of Satan, who works with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of sin in those who are perishing, because they did not receive the love of truth, that they might be saved. And for this reason, Yahweh will send them strong delusion that they would believe the deception. Satan tries to pull you back from the house of Yahweh with lying propaganda and deception. He tries to change the name of Yahweh to names of pagan gods that should have never been used, names like Lord, Bel, and Elohim. Please turn to Isaiah 14, verse 12 through 14, page 538. How you have fallen from heaven, O Hillel, Lucifer, a prophetite, Venus, child of the light. How you are cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nation. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend above the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of Yahweh. I will sit in the highest place of the holy mountain of the congregation. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. In this one word, Hillel, the root word of name Hili, we can see from the history that she had fallen from being Yahweh's wife. She fell, she turned from a righteous being that upheld and taught Yahweh's laws to become the adversary, the enemy of Yahweh, and all who reverence Yahweh by keeping his laws. When she did this, she became known as Shalom. Turn to Leviticus 28 verse 2, page 649. Son of man, say to that prince of Tyre, this is what Father Yahweh says, because your heart is lifted up and you have said, I am a God Elohim, and I sit in the seat of a God Elohim in the midst of the seas. I, Yahweh, therefore say to you, yet you are created being and not the Almighty, though you set your heart to be the Almighty. She lifted herself up as a Lord Baal and Elohim. Don't let Satan pull you into the world of fools. Stand up and say, get behind me, Satan. I don't want to hear it. I want Yahweh's way of life. In the second book of Yisrayl, chapter 49, verse 120, it says, the laws are to turn them from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan. The power of Satan is darkness. It's the desirable way, the kind that the whole world loves. And from the power of Satan to Yahweh, that they might receive forgiveness. You won't receive forgiveness as long as you do not uphold everything that is written in this book. There is no way you will receive forgiveness if you break these laws. If you hang on to sin and keep hanging on to it, the time is coming very shortly. Now when you won't live any longer, you will be cast out where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. As the scripture said, the time to turn from it is now. Don't listen to a foolish, stupid propaganda, the power of Satan. She calls pastors some really nasty names, but don't listen to a foolish garbage. Hold on like a bulldog. Stand strong for Yahweh. Keep studying, learn what to teach, and may Yahweh bless you.
And now it's my honor and privilege to present to you son of Yisrayl, Deacon Abel Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Now today we're going to be talking about the craftiness of Satan and the craftiness of our deceivers or our followers. Many scriptures talk about how crafty Satan is, and how she can deceive. Like for example, Genesis 3, it shows how Satan was able to deceive Eve, and then Satan's follower, Eve, was able to coax Adam into following her in that sin. And we can also see in these last days, Satan's follower, Pope Francis, has deceived many people and is still deceiving people to follow Satan and to follow that sin. And Satan even tried to entrap Yeshua, entrap and deceive Yeshua, into worshiping her. But we can see Yeshua's response. Let's turn over to Matthew 4. Matthew 4, and let's look at verse 1. He says, then Yeshua was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, afterward he was hungry. So when the tempter came to him, and she said, if you are the Son of Yahweh, command that these stones be turned to bread. But he answered, it is written, man does not live by bread alone, but by the every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Yahweh. Notice, he used scripture. He used the things that he studied and that he learned and knew, against Satan. Verse 5 says, then the devil took him up into the in the holy city and set him on the pinnacle of the sacred precincts of the house of Yahweh, and said to him, If you are the son of Yahweh, throw yourself down, for it is written, for he will give his malachim charge concerning you, to keep you in all your ways. They will bear you up in their hands if you strike your foot against the stone. So you can see there, she tried to use scripture. Now look at Yahshua's response. Yahshua said to her, It is also written, you must not test Yahweh your father. So he knew his studies. He studied, and he used the word of Yahweh, to not be deceived. Verse 8 says, And again the devil took him up an exceedingly high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and the magnificence of them. And said to him, I will give you all of these things if you fall down and worship me. Notice she tried to use the money, the power, to try to influence Yahshua. But notice what Yahshua said. Then Yahshua said to her, Get away, Satan, for it is written, Yahweh your father you must reverence, and him only you must serve. And so then verse 11 says, Then the devil left him, and behold, Malachim came and ministered to him. So you can see how Yahshua, he kept himself from being deceived. He didn't allow himself to be deceived by what Satan was offering him. But you can see in Genesis 3 how Satan was able to deceive Eve, using that craftiness. Let's turn over to 2 Corinthians 11. 2 Corinthians 11, let's look at verse 3. He says, But I fear by any means, as the Satan subtly deceived Eve with her craftiness, so your minds may be corrupted and led astray from the simplicity that is in the Messiah. This is what Satan does. She tries to deceive. Don't let this occur to us like it occurred to Eve. And Satan uses the same tricks that she used before. She can use your worldly family, your parents, your siblings, that's out in the world, your conscience. She can use a fall away if you're talking a fall away. She can even use money and power. Even she can use even the news media, to try to make you think that you're not supposed to be here at the house of Yahweh. You're not supposed to be here in the work of Yahweh. In the second book of Yisrayl, going on to perfection, number 27, verse 101, it says, That was the message that he told Adam. He set him in the garden to guard and keep this. He said, Don't let it change. Well, Adam, he wasn't deceived, but he was tempted to going out and see Grandma, to go out and see Aunt Joe, or whoever it was he was going to see. And of course he fell into sin. Whatever sin it was, sin is sin. He should have kept his mind on the garden, guarding and keeping it instead of going out and visiting kinfolks. He says, You need to do this, brethren. You need to buckle down and get into studying every minute you possibly can. Either study the books of Israel, the book of Yahweh, or listen to the sermons. In fact, you can listen to the sermons now in one ear if you train yourself to do that and read, You can do two things at once. You can study both ways here. You can listen to the sermons on one hand and read in the other. Don't waste your time. Keep building your mind. He said it's going to be worth it here in a few days now. The time is so short. It's going to be worth it here in, not too long. Praise Yahweh. He says, you're going to see all of us break loose, and we're going to receive this great gift if you're ready. If you're not ready, you're going to be left out. If you're able to be deceived, you're going to be left out. And the time is so short now that Satan's going to try to use every trick in the book, to try to drag you away from the house of Yahweh, try to deceive you, and drag you away from Yahweh's house or from the work of Yahweh. Recently Satan even used History Channel to try to deceive. This is all a part of Satan's craftiness, and she's going to use it to the very end, but more so now than ever before, because we're so close to the end. In the 10th book of Yisrayl, part 1, chapter 19, verse 35, he says, well, here he's saying, don't be tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine, by everyone that wants to rise up against Abel in these last days. Don't be tossed about by this, by the sly of running men and cunning craftiness in which they lie in wait to deceive. Yes, there are deceivers all over the world. Satan has deceived the whole world. If they were not deceived, they would be here at the house of Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. He says, in the last days I'll establish my house. The prophet said, Yahweh gives you Yahweh gives you names. He gives you places. He gives you the time period when all of this is going to be established. And he says before that, in Zechariah, there was no salvation. No salvation. Everyone was deceived for a certain amount of years after the disciples were wiped out. If you're a fool and you don't want to believe the words of the prophets, then you can go on in your deception. But if you want salvation, it's offered right here. It's the only place in the Bible that you'll find it's offered. Praise Yahweh. He says, so if you'll do what they're saying here, he gave some purposes so that you won't be carried away by every wind of doctrine. Believe in Yahshua, trust in what he said, and trust it because he's the one who was sent. Now, if you can get that in your mind, go back to Daniel now. Daniel 12:2. I hope you don't fall in that category here. And if you won't pay attention, if you'll just pay attention to the words of Yahshua and do what he said. That's how we're gonna not be deceived. Pay attention to what's being taught. Study. In Daniel 12:2, it talks about how those that are righteous will wise, or those that are wise, they'll be resurrected to everlasting life. And those that were deceived, they'll be resurrected to shame and contempt. So let's fall into that first category, not the second category. Let's turn over to 2 Corinthians 4, verse 2, page 903. And he says, we have renounced the hidden things of dishonesty, not walking in craftiness, nor handling the word of Yahweh, the law and the prophets deceitfully, but by manifestation of the truth, commending ourselves to every man's conscience in the sight of Yahweh. Being that role model and keeping the laws of Yahweh. And this is what Satan does. She walks in craftiness. She tries to trick us. And like she did to Yeshua, sometimes she'll even use excerpts out of Yahweh's word to try to trick us. But if we're not guarding ourselves, we'll fall for it. So let's turn over to Ephesians 4:14. Ephesians 4. Ephesians 4:14. It says, "We are no longer children, to be tossed to and fro, but about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, in which they wait to deceive." We should be wise enough in our studies now, listening to what is taught, that we won't be deceived. And this is how we won't, if we're studying, if we're, keeping all these things in mind. So don't let them deceive you. In the second book of Yisrayl, going on to perfection, number 23, verse 59, he says, verse 3, "But I fear that by any means is the serpent subtly deceived Eve with her craftiness. So your minds," notice this is the influencing of the mind. They influence the mind. They play these little tricks on you, that get you to think that you shouldn't be here. May be corrupted. Corrupted with what? Think about the little things that you're doing to bring the hatred, the bad words and the words to one another. Led astray from the simplicity that is in the Messiah. Yes, the Messiah can't deal with it. Yahweh can't deal with it. And in fact, he said it cuts you off from him. These things cut you off from Yahweh. And Satan's going to try harder than ever to deceive you. Using their craftiness to try to pull you away from the house of Yahweh because the time is so short. And Satan doesn't work with mankind directly. She's not going to come down and talk to you. But she inspires mankind, to deceive. She uses mankind to deceive. And she's used an agency, this agency that she's used all through history, that deceives. It's the same God-worshipping agency, or the same God-worshipping religion that Cain started. Back in Genesis 10. Remember Genesis 10? And Cush fathered this Nimrod system. Cain's religion, this Nimrod system, was of force. Force and murder and tyranny. It was called the Pharisees and Sadducees, Essenes and Herodians back then. and now it's called the Coptic Catholic religion. Remember, Coptic means Egyptian, being like the Egyptian gods. It's his way of Cain, yielding to Satan, being like the gods. If you remember 1 Samuel 7, remember the Easter goddess. This money-making scheme of, the holidays. You get pulled into that. Then you want to go visit your kinfolks. They pull you into more of it. This all starts with that little bit of deception, that we allow ourselves to be pulled into this sin. So don't allow ourselves to be pulled into it. The Apostle Shaul gave us some advice in Ephesians. Ephesians 6, let's look at verse 11. It says, "Put on the whole armor of Yahweh, that you may be able to stand against the wiles, crafty ways, schemes of the devil. For we not only wrestle against flesh and blood, but also against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of this darkness which is in the world, against spiritual forces of the evil one in the heavens." Remember, darkness is sin. The law is light and darkness is sin. It says in verse 13, "Therefore take on the whole armor of Yahweh, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, having overcome all, to stand. Stand therefore, having your waist belted with the truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, having shod your feet with the preparation of the message of peace, and above all, taking on the shield of the faith, which you'll be able to quench the fiery darts of the evil one," the influences. "And take on the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Yahweh, the law and the prophets." The book of Yahweh. "Pray always with entreaty and supplication in the Spirit, and to this and keep watch with all perseverance, always interceding for all of the saints." So let's put on these things. Let's keep on our studies. That way we're not able to be deceived. The end is closer than ever before. As the old saying goes, don't be deceived, only believe all the prophets have spoken. We're a fool if we don't believe what the prophets have spoken. So let's keep on studying. Keep paying attention to what is brought out here, and come to the classes. And that way we won't be able to be deceived. If y'all please stand. I'd like to turn it over to the next speaker, Kano.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may all be seated. Going along with what's been coming out in many of the numbers and the things we're seeing in the signs of the heavens and all of the things that Yahweh is showing us, Yahshua, our high priest, is showing us, we're seeing many very interesting things and things that many people would call them coincidences, but they just don't seem to work out that way when discussing or talking about the plan of Yahweh. And today we want to go back and look at something that we looked at before. We recognize that there were many mistakes, I guess was one way you could say it. And that is the lives and deaths of Vernon George Hawkins and Maggie Mae Hawkins, pastor's brother, the one that named him from the womb. That was Vernon. At not quite 2 years old, he did that. And then you have, of course, Maggie Mae, that's pastor's mother, and then William Otis, which is pastor's father. There's some very interesting things when we started to look into it. And what started this was a great Kahan noticed that when he was looking at the headstone that's down at the exhibit, which, by the way, that was the original headstone that was placed on Maggie Mae's grave. But we noticed when we started looking into it, the dates were wrong. And her actually year she was born was not 1904, but that's what was on her headstone. It was 1906. And her date of birth, of course, was July 7th, which was 7/7. That's also the same day Pastor had the dream about the gold flakes. And her date of death was February the 20th of 1956. And of course, that was 2/20. That was the day Pastor was released from jail. So that became very interesting. And we started to go back and look at her death certificate, which, if you remember, had many discrepancies. And just to kind of give a few, but one thing that we'll see in this is how much it ties back into not only Pastor, not only into Vernon, but also into Jacob, the other witness. And it's very self-explanatory when we look at it. This right here is Maggie Mae's death certificate. And of course, it was issued in 1957. The first thing I want you to notice is where it says date of birth. You see the date? August 28th. Whose date of birth is that? That's Pastor. That's Yisrayl Hawkins. Her date of birth was July 7th of 1906. So once right there, we have Pastor. Somehow he got into here in 1956. Another very interesting note here at the bottom, and this can be made available so anyone can have it and read. If you notice at the bottom, it says, I hereby certify that I attended. This is the doctor signing off on the death certificate. I hereby certify that I attended the deceased from February 19th, 1957 to February 20th, 1957. I last saw the deceased alive on February 20th, 1957. Date of death, February 20th, and that's 1956. She died in 1956. That's also what is on her headstone. It's very interesting, the difference between 57 and 56. One of the first things we notice, if you notice right here, we have numbers. If you use Pastor's date of birth, August 28th, and the year she was born, well, it's very strange, and why would they do that? Why would they tie these things together? And is it a coincidence? And why so? Well, these are a few things, and this is just putting numbers together. This is simple math, okay? So if we take 49 plus 5 plus 23, which remember that was 49 years, which is 7 times 7, 77. 5 months, 23 days, what do you think that totals? You're right, 77. Now I'm sure that's total coincidence. But continuing. Some other things that are found on her death certificate. And one thing I want to remind you before we leave off of 77, remember Pastor was born at the ends of the earth. When they crossed across that Canadian river, this right here would be Purcell. Let me zoom out a little bit. This would be Purcell, Oklahoma. This is the Canadian River. This right here is that bridge that they crossed when Pastor was born. Pastor was born right here, right on the edge of that. You see this road branches out, goes this way, and then goes this way, but he was born right here. They didn't quite make it to that fork in the road. This right here goes to downtown Lexington, which is a whopping 2 blocks. You know, it's huge. You should see it. And this, of course, goes off that way. Well, one of the interesting points, we'll see if we can zoom in enough so you can see it. Pastor, that highway is, of course, Highway 77. But the highway stops right there. And, of course, he was born on the ends of the earth. Of course, you had the unassigned lands right there where that dot was at. That would be around the proximity where he was born. And, of course, that all tied in with the land run of 1889. Now, that's with 1977. Now, of course, when Pastor, or the land run of 1889, when Pastor's mother died, now, of course, everyone's familiar with hearing his stories about his mother and how dear she was to him. And you can hear that through what he says and how he speaks. And really, if you didn't know better, you'd never know that the woman passed away in 1956. That's been a long time. But to hear the meaning that this woman plays in his life is very strong. And there's some very interesting things that we see. On Maggie's death certificate, you see at the very top, you have 5721. 5721. Well, the number 57 in Hebrew means Abel. It means Abel, laminating, and mourning. Mourning. 57 means Abel. Does anyone want to guess how old Pastor was when his mother died? He was 21 years old. That's how old he was when she died. Another interesting note, when you look to this part of the death certificate. Now, all these are things that are added in by those who keep the records. They're added in by those who keep the records. You have the number 252, 10, and 2. So 252, 10, and 2. 252 in the Brown Driver and Briggs, it's also in Strong's, means brother. 252 means brother, and that's what we see right here. When Pastor was born, Of course, his brother J.G. was born in 1924. He was in his 10th year of age. When Pastor was born, Vernon was in his 2nd year of age. He had almost completed his 2nd year. You have the word brother. J.G. was getting ready to become 10. Vernon was getting ready to become 2. You add 252 plus 10 plus 2, that's 264. That means brotherhood or brothers in the Hebrew Strongs. It also means in the BDB, Brown Driver and Briggs, it means brotherhood. So once again, showing, and that was very interesting in itself that it would lay out that way. But then we have the discrepancies of, well, she was 49 when she died. It says 1956. The doctor says 1957. And the relevance that comes behind that, and don't forget about Jacob and Vernon, because there's something that ties into their date of birth also that's very important, and also William Otis's date of death. That is very important. So going off 1956 and 1957, this is what we want to look at. Remember, 56 and 57 mean Abel. They both mean Abel. They both tie together as Abel, and they mean Abel. In 1956, which was the year Maggie died, that word comes from 3498. Word 3498 means to be left over, remain. Now remember, you have pastor tied into this. When Maggie died, pastor was left over. And keep in mind what this woman went through in her life. By the time she died at the age of 49, she had already lost 2 children. She lost one in 1929 to a fever that was going through. There was no cure for. The young child died at 3 years old. And she had just lost Vernon 7 months before this. Vernon was killed in a car accident where he was literally thrown from the car. And he died a very tragic death. And that was a Memorial Day weekend of 1955. So this woman had gone through a lot of trauma in her life. This woman had experienced many things in 49 years. But even in her death, it says that there would be something remain over, leave a remnant, to save over, preserve alive, to excel, to show excess, to have more than enough, and have access. Well, in these things, if you remember, Revelations 12:6 says that a woman would flee to the wilderness. She would flee to the wilderness, and there she would nurture for 1,260 days. Flee to the wilderness and nurture for 1,260 days. Remember how pastor ties back into Maggie May, actually tying back into being on the top of the certificate, and actually we'll get into it a little bit more. He actually ties into it in more than you can imagine. When you get to 1957, now this is what the doctor wrote on the death certificate. Why he wrote that, no one has any idea. But he also wrote on the death certificate, which is important, right here, it's actually May 6th, 1957. May 6th, which is 5-6. What is 56? Abel. That's right, 56 is Abel. Well, look at 1957, which really has no rhyme or reason to be on this death certificate. 1957 compared to 2372, well, 1957 means to dream or sleep. 2372 means to gaze at, mentally to perceive, to contemplate with pleasure, specifically to have a vision of, behold, look, prophesy, provide. Remember his dream he had of snowflakes. These snowflakes, you hear in the world they say you need to be a perfect 10. All Yahweh is saying you need to be as a perfect 7. You need to come to completion. Well, this is what Pastor's seen in that dream. He's seen many things take place with this vision of gold on 7/7 as the snowflakes fell, and of course it represented all of these people. There's a remnant left over from a woman. And remember, on the ends of the earth, when Pastor was born on August 28th of 1934, that was the work of Yahweh actually beginning. That was the one sent, birth was given to him, and it began at that point. And it began to move forward from that point, because even in the birth of this man, there was a child, of course, 2 years of age, that would give utterance to his name. If you remember in Isaiah 49, verses 1 through 3, it talks about how he would be named from the bowels of his mother. From the bowels of his mother's womb would he be named. And of course, that glory, Yahweh says that he would be glorified through this man. Through this man. And this brother, this not quite 2-year-old brother, would actually be the one who named him, which is Vernon. Vernon was born October 20th of 1932. That's a fact. We went through a lot of trouble having to prove that to the state of Texas to have his headstone changed from 1930 to 1932. And of course, we were able to do so because we were able to prove his actual date of birth. Now, Pastor was born, of course, August the 28th of 1934. That's 441 days apart. Interesting that 441 comes from number 502, and it means to learn, to causatively, to teach, to learn, to teach, to utter. Now remember, when this woman fled to the wilderness, Oklahoma became a wilderness in 1930s because of this Dust Bowl, which we're going to hit a little bit before, we're going to cover that a little bit before we move out of this. This Dust Bowl made this land become a wilderness. People were leaving Oklahoma. They were going to California. The heat, the dust, the lack of rain, it had destroyed the land. It was consuming the land in those days. Well, of course, there was teaching going on because there was a young man who was coming there who was born. Remember when they crossed that bridge in Chickasha? They crossed that bridge in Chickasha and Maggie May went into labor pains, but they subsided. One interesting point, remember, World War II was going on around that time. When you go across the bridge in Chickasha, Oklahoma, and you go to the right-hand side, now that's the fairgrounds. Back then, it was a prison camp for German soldiers. That's where they were holding the German soldiers. Well, remember, those labor pains subsided. They proceeded on into Purcell and then went across the bridge into Lexington. And there, of course, she went into labor, and that's where Pastor was born on the right side there. And that also is where his name was uttered, and that's where Maggie May began to teach, to instruct, to raise up, to rear this child, to bring him. Now, I want to show you very quickly about this Dust Bowl. We have a book here, and this is called The Dust Bowl Through the Lens. And it's very interesting, the facts that are tied in to the Dust Bowl. I want you to notice this one part right here. And this book is available for anyone that wants to see it. And this section right here, it says, from 1931 to 1937, it stopped raining, creating a drought through the Great Plains that has never been equaled. With much of the topsoil having been pulverized by overplowing and much of the native grass that held the dirt in place having been destroyed by overgrazing, the soil was already in bad shape. So that's what led to this blowing of dust, the breaking up of the land, no grass to hold it down, and then the wind blowing. But notice it said the record drought was accompanied by record heat, further drying out the land. During one stretch, notice in 1934, temperatures exceeded 100 degrees Fahrenheit for 40 consecutive days, reaching as high as 118 degrees. Hundreds of people and livestock, of course, died from the heat. So this is what people were fleeing from as Pastor and his family was going to there. Him being in the womb, it's not like he could have kicked and screamed and not joined along, right? He had to go. He didn't have much of a choice. Well, in going there and in making his journey there, I want to count, and I want to do this for everybody to see it because I don't want you to miss it. In counting off what we just read about the Dust Bowl, of course, they showed that this drought started in 1931 and it went into 1937. 1938, it started to dissipate with some rain, but it didn't completely go away. But it did start to dissipate with some rain. Now, in 1938 and into 1939, that's when they said recovery started beginning, and by the 1940s, they were able to do some stuff to the land. But notice, in 1931, that would have been the first year. 32, the second, 33, the third, 34, the fourth, 35, and this is the end of the year. December 1934 would have been the 4th. Of course, 35 the 5th. 36 the 6th, and 37 would be the 7th. So if you notice, by the time you get to 1934, that's about 3.5 years when you get to pastor's date of birth, right? Somewhere around in there. But if you were to go off and count from January 1st of 1931, which is when they actually start recording, that being the worst time, and you were to take those days all the way to pastor's date of birth, of course you come up with 1,335 days. And Daniel 12:12 says, blessed are those who wait to 1,335 days. Blessed are those. Blessed is this whole world that waits to 1,335 days. Now, in this death of Maggie May, we see this where she, of course, the discrepancies that took place on her certificate, and of course 2 brothers that were tied in the certificate. Of course, the first one we read, 10, that 252 meaning brother, and then 10, we have, of course, JG or Jacob. Now, Jacob was born September the 11th of 1924. If you look up 9/11, it's from 909, and it means separation. It means separation. In the Book of the Two Witnesses, and of course it's right here on page 189, Pastor wrote this many years ago after the death of Jacob, and it says in 1975, Jacob returned to the States. His first stop before going to Odessa was Abelin. Before going to Odessa, Texas, was my home in Abelin, the homestead, where he remained overnight, at which point I discussed the progress of the work of Yahweh with him, and offered land that I had already purchased in order to build the sanctuary for the house of Yahweh. However, our separation was foretold. They would separate. They would not work together. In fact, they didn't come back to do work together again until they signed the trademark of the house of Yahweh to each other to combat someone suing for the name house of Yahweh. But notice, this separation was foretold. In 9/11, Jacob's birth actually meaning separation or alone. The day he was born, or the day he died, the day he died is 3/22. It was March 22nd of 1991 is when he died. Notice it means backward. And this is not to put Jacob down in any way. We have a menorah right here, and he is the 6th lamp of that lampstand. He represents a work of Yahweh. So in no way is this to degrade, but to show what Isaiah said in Isaiah 48 or 43:28, that he would be given into the curse. He would die. But 3:22 from 268 means backwards, and 268 comes from 299, which means to hinder part, hence, behind, backwards, time to come without. And 299 goes right back to the word brother, but it means brother of wrong. There's much more to bring in that in itself, but we want to get to one more thing before we stop that is very interesting, before we hand it over to the next speaker, because this is very encouraging. You would never guess that you would have dates given where people died that would tie in to future priest's birth. And you would never guess that a message is sent through that. Vernon died, of course. He died the last week, Memorial Day. And keep in mind, when Pastor says don't go out and drive around, don't go out be fooling around. Well, Vernon had went out with 2 of his friends. One was a brother-in-law, one was a young man. The young man's buried over here actually in Clyde Cemetery. He died just a few days after. He was killed in the car crash also, but not immediate like Vernon was. Well, 45 years later, on March 31st, there was a young future priest born. March 31st of 2000. Those 45, you look at the word 45, and it comes from word number 1. It means father of strength. It also means valiant. Possessing or showing courage and determination. Now, that is something that we're not saying is just installed into this one young man, but it's a representation of what Yahweh wants instilled in all young men, all young women. Because remember, Pastor had a dream. One was gold flakes, One was of a 24-hour school where our children would be trained. It's an investment that Yeshua said that once you make that investment, don't take it and hide it, but you take it and you multiply it. William Otis died September the 6th of 1974. September 6th of 1974. 27 years to the day, 2 future priests were born. On that one day, September 6th, 2001. Of course, 27 years, the number 27 means my Father is judge. And of course, Yisrayl Hawkins is judge. Quickly turn over to Micaiah. Turn over to Micaiah. And this is a very familiar scripture. But remember, Micaiah chapter 4, it says, in verse 1, it says, "But in the last days it will come to pass that the mountain promotion of the house of Yahweh will be established in the chief nation. It will be raised above all congregations, and all people will eventually flow to it. And many nations will say, Come and let us go up to that mountain, to the house of Yahweh, to the house of the father of Jacob, and he will teach us his ways." Notice we're coming to learn to do something, to learn Yahweh's ways, and we will walk in his paths. So we're going to make an agreement to do exactly what we're told to do, because the law will depart from Zion and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. And he will judge between many people and rebuke strong nations afar off. Yes, he will judge. Remember, write this down in your notes to go back and read about even Moshe when he sat in the seat of judgment. And how Yahweh said, Moshe, it's too much for you to judge all matters. Assign some people. Get some people who will follow, who are diligent, who do what they're asked to do. Get those people. Have them assist you. But if there becomes a situation too difficult for them to answer or to judge, let it be brought to you. Why? Because Moshe was the head of head judges, the top of top judges. Just like Yisrayl Hawkins in these last days is the head judge of the house of Yahweh. And that's above all others, above all priests, all kahans, all judges, head judges. He is our head. And by the way, my father's a judge too. Did you know that? Because this dream, I want to tell you something about these 3 young boys that are mentioned. It's not that others aren't mentioned, because there's much more to this that we can get to and cover later. Pastors dream of having a 24-hour school. It's never really come to pass yet. It hasn't yet. There's 2 things that is needed and is a must to have this school. 1, you have to have students for 24 hours a day. 2, you have to have teachers. You can't look at the students and say, why aren't you coming? Without looking at the teachers and say, where are you at? The 3 that are mentioned are 3 boys that gave their life to being at the school as close as anybody to 24 hours a day. That says a lot. That says a lot about where we need to go and what we need to do. There's much more to deal with Maggie May, and it feels odd calling her Maggie instead of Miss Hawkins. But keep in mind the things that are shown and the things that are said, and the 7 years of the Dust Bowl and who was born in the midst of that Dust Bowl, and this woman that fled to the wilderness, because there's a story to be told. And if we bind ourselves to that and we tie ourselves to the one sent, there's no way we can miss out on this kingdom. But if we go any other way, then we'll miss out on everything. At this time, if everyone would please stand, I'd like to turn it over to the great Kahan Benjamin Krause Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. Got a lot to cover this morning. Okay. We're picking up where the great Kahan left off. He was talking about Pastor's mother. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, but it all ties in together, and you'll see how. But I'm going to talk to you today about this comet, these 2 comets. Remember, Pastor mentioned last Sabbath on March 3/19 about these 2 comets to cut it close to Earth's orbit. It says that's the They put a picture here of these green, you can see these green comets. Okay, there's 2 comets, and we'll talk about those and the significance of them. One of them appeared on March 21st, and the other one on March 22nd. That was their closest approach, actually. They can still be seen, but that was their closest approach to the Earth. By the way, does anybody know, Meryl, remember Hale-Bopp, right? Back in 1997, the Great Comet of 1997, this is from NASA, and it shows you that closest approach to the Earth was March 22nd, 1997, exactly 19 years ago. Remember that number 19 and what it represents. A lot was done on that particular number. Now, I want you to remember what Yahweh says about 2016. Yahweh says that 2016, this is in the Greek, by the way, and there's more. I'm just going to cover a little bit today, but it means manifest, glorious, illustrious. Illustrious. Okay? Now, that's probably not going to mean much unless you know what that word means, and I'm going to show you right here. And I want you to write a couple of I'll write as many as you can down, but I'll just kind of go through some of them. Illustrious means well-known, respected, and admired for past achievements. Some of the synonyms is eminent, distinguished, notable, noteworthy, prominent, preeminent, foremost, leading, important, influential, renowned, famous, famed, well-known, celebrated, legendary, esteemed, honored, respected, venerable, august, highly regarded, well thought of, brilliant, and glorious. That's the word illustrious. And you heard the word august too, right? Well, let's look at this word august. It's from dictionary.com. It means distinguished. It means respected and impressive. That's what the word august means, okay? It means distinguished, eminent, venerable, celebrated, great, inspiring, dignified, so on and so forth. If y'all remember, a great Kohan told you one time that 8/28, you remember a pastor's birthday? And remember what was on Maggie May's death certificate? That was no accident that was written there. Let me show you why. 8/28 in the Hebrew, first of all, means Augustus, and it means August. August, 8/28 in the Greek, Strong's. In the Hebrew, it means I will make prominent the sprinkled. I will make prominent the sprinkled. 8/28. Now, could this be some kind of accident? Illustrious. It also means, 2016, by the way, also means conspicuously appear, become visible, especially in a splendid, transforming way. And it's from 2014, and I'll show you this definition real quick. It means to appear, to shine upon, to appear to achieve the fitting purpose. To appear to achieve the fitting purpose. It also means to show to or upon, to bring to light, become visible, to become clearly known. House of Yahweh, make no mistake about it, Yahweh is going to make so clear who Yisrayl Hawkins in this house of Yahweh is and who Yahweh is working with. He already is. And once you see this, Yahweh has this so well mapped out. You are going to marvel. Okay, now, these 2 comets that came this past week, this is from NASA, by the way, and it talks about that they're twins of a sort, these 2 comets. They're called Comet P 2016 BA14, that was actually the second one that appeared on 322. And then on 321, you had Comet 252P/linear. Okay? It says that they'd fly by, Comet 252P would fly by on March 21st at a range of about 3.3 million miles. The following day, P 2016 BA14 will safely fly by our planet at a distance of about 2.2 million miles. It says the closest comets, this will be the third closest flyby of a comet in recorded history. Next to Comet D1770L1 Lexel. You know, that Lex ought to ring a bell. You know, Lex means law. And Lexington and Purcell, remember Pastor's birth? Keep all these things in mind. I can't cover them all today like the great Kahan said. There's so much to this. And Comet C 1983, which was in 1983. And that it was called IRAS Iraqi Al-Kak in 1983. That was 33 years ago. The one in 1770 was 246 years ago. I don't want to get too bogged down with the numbers, but you're going to get a lot of them, so stay tuned. Okay, now a comet, just so you know, a comet is an icy, small solar system body that when passing close to the sun, heats up and begins to outgas, displaying a visible atmosphere or coma, and sometimes also a tail. These phenomena are due to the effects of solar radiation and the solar wind upon the nucleus of the comet. Okay? And here's a picture of some of these. In fact, I think they just landed a spacecraft on a comet not long ago. They actually were able to catch one. I know Pastor said I caught one coming up from Laredo one time. There must be something he knows about that. I'm still trying to figure that one out. But it was something about a busted tooth or something from the dust from the comet. By the way, I did get to see that comet yesterday when I was cleaning. And it actually did have the emerald green. By the way, Comet Cleanser came out in 1956. For your notes. I'm just joking. I use lie. Okay, so continuing on here. Comet Hale-Bopp, you know, that was the last comet that we can all remember. Y'all remember this comet. It was in 1997. They called it the Great Comet in 97. It was discovered in 95. And it says it was probably the most widely observed comet of the 20th century. And y'all remember, it's been brought out before, but I want to remind you also that during that time period, there was news that there was an accompanying craft. It called it the Hale-Bopp Enigma, that there was something actually traveling along with it. Okay, and the scientists were all, baffled over this, and there was a big controversy. In fact, here's one of the articles. Scientists argue about Hale-Bopp companion. They couldn't figure out, what is that next to this comet? What is this? What kind of thing is this? Well, we know what it was, okay? Because hail, the meaning of the word hail means to drag, especially by force, and it means to haul, like to hail into a court. Now, I want you to think of Satan being cast down, the court decision, okay, that was made. And it means people hailed into court people that are hailed into court normally don't go gladly, okay? They're not expecting a warm reception, all right? So they don't go gladly. That's the etymology of hail. And Bop just really tells on her, because the Bop means leader, bright, famous leader, messenger. Remember, Satan's job was to teach the laws of Yahweh. She was a messenger. Remember, bright meaning Lucifer. Remember Lucifer in Isaiah 14. So that was when Satan was cast down in 1997, if you remember. Now, this first comet was seen on 3/21, this past week, and it means to lead up, to bring up. If y'all remember, actually the Lead Laredo event took place on 3/21/2013, and we went over this definition before, but it means to lead up, to bring up, or to offer, as the last Abel is offering us as a sacrifice to Yahweh, an acceptable sacrifice. And if you, in case you don't know what acceptable means, it means 7613. 7613 in Genesis 4, verse 7, means accepted or acceptable. So we all want to become 7613, do we not? Okay? That's why we wear that banner, or we call that, the sash that said 7613 on it. And it means to launch, lead, or loose. Okay, that's 321. In the Hebrew, it means another. It means another or someone else. And it's from a car. That's 311. And it means future. Future or after. Now, y'all remember what Daniel said. Let's turn over to Daniel 12 real quick. Daniel 12. Daniel 12. Think future. Daniel 12, page 684. We're going to look at verse 5. It says, Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood two others, two brothers, Yisrayl and Jacob. One on this side of the bank of the river, and the other on the other side of the bank of the river. Verse 6, And one said to the man clothed in linen. Now they saw the two brothers, he saw the two brothers, but then he talked to the last brother, the one that was remaining. And he said to the man clothed in linen, whom Yisrayl Hawkins is, fully clothed in linen, who on that future day is teaching, how long will it be to the end of these wonders? Okay, so the future day, okay, this one in the future, this one that follows after, okay, the one that follows after or besides, okay, the one following that sixth work. Remember who Jacob, the witness Jacob represented the sixth work. Just so to get a better idea of this is Chagia, or 2 verse 9, and it talks about the glory of the latter house will be greater than the glory of the former. Well, that latter is 3:14, okay, in Hebrew, and here's what it means. 3:14 means last, afterwards, come later, end, future, last one, the last witness, the last ones, the remnant, the last time, western, west. Okay? Western, west. It's not talking about John Wayne. It's talking about the witness in the west. Now, the second one was on 322. The second comet. And it means, it's from 268. It means back part. And it's from 268, and it means the west, or time to come. Remember the latter house, okay? The last one that's to come. Also means hereafter of time, and it goes to 299, which the great Kohan just got done showing you, and I'm not going to be going into that because that's not my part of the sermon. 322, and now here's 322 in the Greek. Now this is very interesting. 322. Now think of 2016 when you read this. It means to exhibit, to indicate, to appoint, to show, to proclaim anyone as elected to office, to announce as appointed a king or general, etc., to lift up anything on high and exhibit it for all to behold. Remember, the world is going to see the rising of the house of Yahweh. You remember the scriptures in Isaiah, right? They're going to see this. It's going to be very clear. They're going to be made prominent. Now it's from 1166, and it means to show, expose to the eyes, metaphorically, give evidence or proof of a thing, to show by words or teach. To show by words or teach. Now here's another, this is another part of 322 that I brought. It means to lift up anything on high and exhibit it for all to behold. To show accurately, clearly, to disclose what was hidden. To show which of these two he has chosen. Is it Pope Francis? Or is it Yisrayl Hawkins? To proclaim anyone as elected to an office, to announce as appointed, king, general, messenger, etc. Now, I don't know if you know this, but comets have always been throughout history harbingers of a couple things. Change of government. They've also been harbingers of doom, showing war and famine and things that are coming. But they are a harbinger of change. That there's going to be a change, okay? By the way, 323, on 323, the next day, I hope you can see this, but if you can see that donkey right there, and you see that individual, looks like he has like a Mexican type hat on, it's like a farmer type guy, and right in front of that is a trumpet, a big trumpet, a big fat trumpet. What could this mean? Lifting the donkeys up? Who's going to lift the donkeys up for the whole world to hear? Here's a closer picture, in case you couldn't see it. Let me zoom out a little bit. Can y'all see that? This was taken on 323, okay, just the other day, over the grounds here. Now, 323, oddly enough, means the same thing as 322 because it's from 322. It means the proclamation of an appointment. The proclamation of an appointment to an office. A showing forth a public appearance. By the way, well, maybe I better not say that just right yet. Hold on. Okay. All right. Right here it says, it gives an example in Luke 180. Until the day when he was announced of his showing to the people as the forerunner of the Messiah, this announcement he himself made at the command of Yahweh. And it means exhibition or showing. And then 322... remember, I think I've already shown it means to show forth, to clearly to proclaim a person elected to an office. The picture time, 323, it was actually 4:57 p.m. And I want you to notice what 4:57 means. It means an opening. An opening. Do y'all remember just a few weeks ago? Something about an opening, that the high priest was going to open something up? Y'all remember that? In the Hebrew, it meant an opening. Pastor saw that the thing with the Liberia on 3:6:16. Remember, it meant to open, an opening, and that the high priest was going to open something up. Well, this means opening, but this is in the Greek, and it means utterance, the opening of the mouth. In other words, a door will be opened, a great door will be opened for the utterance of this message to get to these people that will be gathered. Remember this gathering that's been taking place now that was spoken of in Genesis 49. Remember that number 49 in the gathering, okay? And it's from 4:55, and it means I open, break, broke, open, opened, opening, opens, spoken freely. 323. Does that ring a bell to anybody? Well, the August calendar, August again, remember what August means, highly respected. There's a bus, a green bus, of all colors, right? With the number 323 on the back. Okay? Could that be a coincidence? By the way, does anybody know how old Pastor will be on August 28th? What was that? 83. 83. What could that mean? I think 83 meant something about wings of eagles. Look it up. I don't have time today to go over it. Wings of eagles. And you know, there's a highway. Remember Yahweh said he would make a highway? Remember that Mexican-looking guy, that Central American-looking guy lifting the donkeys up? Well, you know, Yahweh said he would make a highway, and we do have a Highway 83 running right through here, right? I'm not going to go into that today. I'm just going to leave you hanging. Okay? But I want you to know that 83 means wings of eagles. Okay? Wings of eagles. What eagle could that be? I think the great Kahan told us a couple weeks ago who that eagle was, right? Okay, well, let me continue here. I don't want to run out of time. 252, I meant, it was from, let's see, 30, okay. P252, the comet, remember? The great Kahan just showed you 252 meant brother, right? He went through that. He went through all those definitions. But it also means, and it means brother of the same parents. And 252 in the Greek, by the way, means salt. Salt. Hey, by the way, just going to clue you in. 83 runs right into Luke 3:22. Luke 3:22 here in Abelin. You know about Luke 3:22, right? Wow, that must be a coincidence. That we have a Luke 3:22 with a buffalo there. Welcome to Abelin. The highway. It means salt. This all just got to be a coincidence. I just can't. I better not go there. Let me see where I can go here. By the way, on that highway coming up, when I get up right off 83 to come here, here's what you see. Those eagles. I don't know, maybe we'll duct tape those things and use them, you know. I remember when I was living in Alaska, the 49th state, when we would fly on a little Cessna plane, or, you know, one of those little planes that go from village to village, the pilot would throw us a roll of duct tape and say, hey, can you shut that door in the back? So I know a little bit about duct taping planes, okay? So maybe we just need a pilot's license. Anybody here know how to fly? Well, you will know how to fly. You won't need one here pretty soon. You won't be flying this, okay? Yahweh shows that you're going to be lifted up greatly, this great house. Now, 252 linear, 215 in the gematria, 215 means unutterable. It baffles the words. It's unexpressible. Too deep for words. Okay? 215 in the Hebrew means to become, to be or become light. To be or become light. I'm not going to be able to get into all these definitions. But I do want to show you one more, because I will get back to this, okay? There's not enough, I told you, there's not enough time in one setting to go through this, but I do want you to pay attention to this one here, in that word linear, 59, because that means, again, it means Abel. Abel. But it means more than that. It means more than that. It also means a square, a gathering place, a square. Y'all remember Times Square, where Pastor's face is? I'm not going to go into it all today because I can't, but I want you to be keeping these things in mind, because Yahweh has this whole thing mapped out where there will be no doubt in anyone's mind who Yahweh is working with in these last days. There will be no doubt whatsoever. Once you see how beautifully this is laid out. By the way, there's another highway. 83 goes from the north to the south and completely covers the country from north to south. And it runs right through Abelin and ends in Laredo, Texas. And then it picks up in Mexico and goes all the way to Central America and even further. Highway 85, it's called. 59 is the other highway. And it means Abel. It's the 5th longest highway. We'll get into that next time. Hopefully. There'll be probably more mind-blowing events before then, and I won't get to it or something. But I do want to show you something, because tomorrow is what the world calls Easter Sunday, right? Y'all remember the nebula? Y'all remember the nebula, the Horsehead Nebula? Well, recently a wider range picture came out of this thing. Notice this. See the bulldog? Well, we didn't know what the bulldog was doing when we first saw him, but now we know. You see Santa Claus? See his hat? And you see right here, the Easter bunny. You see that bunny? Hey, it looks like that bulldog's telling them, get out of here and don't come back ever again. Can you, before I leave, could you play the video? Play the video, please. I want you to remember the words of the great son of Israel, Abel, Yisrayl. That's you, house of Yahweh. We're going to chase that old Santa Claus, that old Saint Nick, the old 666, right on out of here, right? Praise Yahweh. Well, may Yahweh bless you. It's been a joy to speak to you. I hope to be able to continue this very soon. And I'd like to turn it over now to the great Kohan Ilya Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may all be seated. Of course, in all the things we see with the plans coming to pass, as Yeshua said in Matthew 24, this would be the greatest time of trouble ever. And in today's news, we're not just seeing alarming rates of drug overdoses taking place, of course, nationwide. You see the numbers up, and they're making comments on the world news about it. But now you have certain counties, certain states that are coming up and saying that, listen, we've got huge problems in our communities. Now, of course, this is all coming from the push of drugs, this drug addiction, this drug abuse that is going into our society. Now, one of the things they relate it to is this Toxoplasma gondii, which, of course, we put out in the prophetic words many times, went over many times, and it's bacteria that's found in the feces of cats. And they're saying now that this is being linked to tens of millions of cases of mental illness. Now, why not just teach how to properly deal with a cat? Well, 20% of Americans are on drugs, right? 1 out of every 5 is taking a pill for mental illness. There's a lot of money made in this. Why not do something different? Well, it's all because this love of money. They're saying that this feces is also leading to schizophrenia, depression, suicide, impulsiveness. But they're also saying, of course, there's more articles coming out saying that this rage by adults can be linked to parasites in the brain, uncontrollable rage. It's due to what's been allowed in the body. And then we look at Brussels. Of course, Brussels, Belgium, it's kind of the unsaid capital of Europe for the EU, but it's also headquartered for NATO. That's where NATO has their headquarters. And of course, there this week they had multiple bombings. A lot of people died. Americans dying that just got off the plane and was going to collect baggage. They died, only been there a few minutes, and were caught up in a bombing. And of course, this is devastating to all of those who see it. And I want you to notice Federica Mogherini. Now, of course, she's the EU spokesman. She's the one brokering all these deals you see with treaties about the missile programs. And, of course, she's dealing with the quartet as far as Palestine and Israel. She's trying to build all of these agreements and to get all of these things done. Well, she currently resides in that area of Belgium, in Brussels. And she breaks down to the point of knowing what's taking place that's beyond her control. She can't stop it. No matter how many agreements she signs, no matter how many people the Catholic Church try to grasp around the neck, they're not going to stop what we see. And it's important that everyone here understands and everyone overseas understands. If the house of Yahweh was not in Abelin, Texas, you would see bombings all around you here in the United States of America. The only reason we're not seeing it here is because the house of Yahweh was established in the chief nations and the protection of Yahweh. Don't take these things for granted in any which way, shape, or form, but watch what she does to the point she breaks down. And Yahweh willing, hopefully she's humbling herself to see there's only one way, and maybe she will turn and learn war no more. If we could go ahead and play the news.
Pay close attention. The news you are about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Well, heroin overdoses, mind-altering parasites, and another European nation picking up the pieces after a terror attack. Well, we start our broadcast off with how the state of Wisconsin is dealing with heroin and other opiate overdoses. From 2012 through the end of 2015, 888 people have died in Milwaukee County due to heroin or opiate overdoses. In fact, Common Council President Michael Murphy is calling this a public health epidemic after he released the results of a study he commissioned about heroin. Mr. Murphy said since 2005, we've seen a 500% increase in heroin deaths, and the results show that the problem is worse than what we have by far as it relates to homicides and accidents, car accidents. And that's, he said, of course, there's not one location that this is limited to because people are dying throughout the entire county. That's right.
Of those people who are dying, 70% are overdosing inside their own homes or apartments. And Mr. Murphy is submitting the numbers from his study to the Medical College of Wisconsin for treatment and prevention programs. And as a note, Catan, Milwaukee County is the most populous county in Wisconsin, so surely the numbers throughout the state are going to be on the rise as well.
I bet. Wow. Well, are you feeling a bit more angry lately? Maybe even more aggressive? Well, the problem may be in part in your head. A parasite called Toxoplasma gondii, toxo for short, this small parasite with a big name has shown to be responsible for altering the behavior of its host. The parasite reproduces in the stomach of cats and spends its entire life always trying to get back inside of one. For instance, when an animal like a mouse or rat gets infected with the parasite through the feline or the cat's excrement, the parasite gets into the rodent's brain.
Wow. And once there, it literally rewires the host brain, making the rodent fall in love with the cats. So that it'll go find one, and of course what's going to take place? get eaten by the cat, and there the parasite accomplishes its goal.
Back in the gut.
So much in the same way, humans can get infected with the parasite also through cat feces. Now, in fact, more than 1/3 of people in the world and 20% of people in the U.S. are infected with Toxoplasma gondii. It was previously thought that the vast majority never suffer any known effects.
Well, new studies have found that the parasitic infection has been linked to schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression, suicide attempts, risk-taking, impulsiveness, and aggression. The study also found that people with the parasite score higher on anger and aggression tests, and people with anger disorders are twice as likely to have the parasite. Well, scientists speculate that because it's so common and it's being linked to mental illness, the odds are likely that it could translate to tens of millions of cases globally.
That's a lot. Well, the latest target for terrorism has been Brussels, Belgium. On March 22nd at 8 a.m., the height of rush hour in the Brussels airport, an explosion hit the departure hall and then another explosion 10 minutes later. Now, terrified travelers ran from the airport as smoke could be seen coming from the building.
Witnesses said after the first explosion, the ceiling was caving in on people. Many were injured. Then the second explosion was said to be louder and more destructive, causing more ceiling tiles to cave in and rupturing plumbing pipes overhead. Some described it as a war zone. Well, as planes circled over the airport, air traffic control had to actually turn them away because it was just too risky to land.
Too much chaos going on at the airport.
That's right.
Well, not long after the airport was attacked, another explosion could be felt as a train was leaving the Melbeck metro station located near the headquarters for the European Union. Well, so far, at least 28 people have died and dozens more injured between the two coordinated attacks.
Now, due to the acts of terror in the city, Brussels has shut down all of its public transportation, including, of course, as we just spoke about, the airport, the metro where the other attack was, buses and trains. Alert level has been raised to its highest, the maximum level that they have, and the U.S. Embassy has advised Americans in Brussels to shelter in place.
Now, Simon Marks, a freelance journalist, was an eyewitness to the Metro blast. In an interview with RT, he described the scene, saying, "I was arriving near the European Council building where heads of state often hold meetings. You could see smoke coming out of the entrance of the metro station."
He continued, there was many people who were injured pouring out onto the street, and soon afterwards there was many paramedics, police, military, soldiers, a lot of personnel arriving on the scene, obviously, to treat the wounded.
These coordinated attacks come as the Belgium capital has been on high alert following the arrest of suspected Paris attacker Salam Abdeslam last week. Now, European intelligence officials have been telling us for months it's not a matter or a question of if, but when the next terror attack would happen.
Now, we finally turn our attention to Federica Mogherini, the foreign minister who works on behalf of 500 million citizens of the European Union and representing the EU on such hot-button issues as Iran's nuclear power program, the Ukrainian crisis, a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and most recently, the influx of Mediterranean migrants, hundreds of whom have died at sea trying to reach Europe.
Well, this month she outlined her mission. The European Union is finally ready to take its own responsibilities, saving lives, welcoming refugees, addressing the root causes of the phenomenon, dismantling criminal organizations.
Well, on the day of the two attacks in Belgium, Mogherini was speaking in Jordan, praising Islam as a religion of peace and dialogue and cooperation, when she cut her speech short, breaking down in tears over the acts of terrorism taking place in her own country. Let's take a look.
We believe that the message that is coming from Amman constantly and consistently of an Islam that is an Islam of peace and dialogue and cooperation is what we need in this moment, here in the region and in Europe. I will stop here. You will understand this. Today is a difficult day.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you for your strong message of support to Jordan. And we stand with you today and with our friends in Europe and with all peace-loving nations and
Don, it must be hard for somebody who's so involved in trying to help others, bring peace to certain situations, and really improve the lives of so many that are suffering at this time. To have to experience that, you can tell she's definitely emotional over the whole situation.
Wonder if it seems like she feels like she has her hands tied at times, trying to bring peace, but only we're seeing war continuously.
Well, surely we can see the problems all over the world are getting worse daily. We can see hatred growing and love growing cold as predicted for our generation. The nuclear burning that will darken the sun is the only prophecy left in this generation to be fulfilled, except for the gathering of the remnant by the house of Yahweh. Call, write, or email the house of Yahweh for absolute proof of these prophecies, and then become part of the greatest work on the face of the earth. Here's how.
When you contact the House of Yahweh, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and the Prophetic Word magazine. To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abelin, Texas 79604, or call them at 1-800-613-9494. You can visit them on any of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.YisraelHawkins.com, www.yahwehsbranch.com, or visit www.ypnnews.com. You can also email them at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And don't forget the greatest study resource to the Holy Scriptures available today. Visit www.yisraelsays.com to aid you in gaining understanding.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, another inspiring message from Yisrayl Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katana Alexander.
Thanks for watching.
At this time, if everyone would please stand, I'd like to introduce Yahweh's anointed seventh Malach and the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kahan Yisrayl Abel Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh. We got a big crowd today. Praise Yahweh. Let's go, boy. Praise Yahweh. Wonderful. You may be seated. May the peace and joy of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. The sermons there, I know it's hard to absorb all these numbers, but you can do it. It's like telephone numbers. You can get them in your mind and what they mean. Kohan Eliyahu will be back real soon to continue on. If you want to work on that number 21, I was 21 when Mother died. It's so interesting because that number 21 means Hezekiah's mother, not Hezekiah, but his mother. It's very important what a mother can do with children if she keeps her vows and stands up to what she vowed with the children and always upholds it. If two can't walk together, if they're not agreed, they can't walk together. And of course, that's where kingdoms are split. Hezekiah was the one that actually rebuilt the temple due to his mother's training. He was a king in Israel. Y'all know that, though. I know you know that. We're rebuilding it now. The house of Yahweh. If you remember, it got run down, got polluted, got God worshippers started coming in, putting their Easter trinkets in every corner, and but he took care of that and got all of it out of there. Of course, this time it's going to stay out. You know, it never will be polluted again. And those chosen for the new world where righteousness dwells, you know, they're the ones that's going to be forever, and you're going to be guarding it. You have the greatest opportunity of anyone that's ever been called in the 6,000-year period. You're the finishing touch of this plan. The numbers are very impressive, the way the newspapers are going after our articles that are written. This one about why aren't your prayers answered? And I went to extremes to show how the world is worshiping gods and they have no power. Yahweh is the only being in the universe that has power, and his ability, as you could see, to line these things up with the numbers as he has, and paints you, he gives you a perfect scenario in numbers here, and shows that he's the one that's in control of this and got it all laid out in advance. He did this before he created the earth. Yes, he had this plan all lined out, and each of you lined out to be part of that plan. That's what you're here for. That's the reason you're here. 120,925 already on that news media's running this thing, and each one of those news medias have thousands of subscribers. There's one of them here shows an audience of 1 million. Another one has 1,091,000. Another one has 1,469,000. Another one has 2,351,000. And that's just 4 of hundreds. So you can see that the people that this is going out to, that's going out to a number of people, quite a few. 2 billion, I would say so. The one from last week, Yisrayl Hawkins presents alternative to pharmaceutical drugs and news article. That's doubled from last week. 247,468 news agencies running this thing that have all these big numbers behind them. The one before that, and I asked this morning, how can this be? You know, that was run 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and how are these people still latching on to this and reading it and it coming up? Well, we don't know, but we're going to find out, or try to find out. But it's a great thing. This one is up to almost 300,000. It's 299,913. Now that's the one that was run 2 weeks ago. Yisrayl Hawkins speaks on gay rights and what the Bible really says about them. And of course, they're going to find out in that article that the United States governments is not really the ones that's running the United States governments. It's not running the Supreme Court. The Vatican is running the Supreme Court, but the Vatican is running every nation on earth right now. They're all worshiping ISIS. And of course, there's been some people griping about that because that was the exposure of all these religions, that they're all worshiping Satan and her gods. And of course, Satan, as you can see in Yekiskia, the 14th chapter, her plan is to bring man to nothing, just to destroy man, heaven, and earth. There's some pretty impressive names, but I don't want to take time to name these newspapers, all of them. We're at the top again on all of this. So you can see it's backed up with Yahweh's actions of what the two elders that just spoke here was bringing out. Let's see, I told you about the mother of Hezekiah. That's number 21. That Kohan Yisrayl Hawkins is going to bring more on that the next time he speaks on the subject. But Greek. That's what I meant to tell you. The Greek in number 21 means jump for joy. Jump for joy. Remember? Jump for joy. That's the way I feel. You can too if you find your joy in Yahweh. In Deuteronomy 12, let's look at that right quick. And this is your job. This is what you should be concentrating on. Learning to do this. Learning to find this joy in Yahweh. And Yahweh calls you to His house for that purpose. He didn't call you to His house to judge it or to criticize your neighbor. He called you to the house to let you overcome and learn that this is the most joyous place on the face of the earth, and you never want to leave it for any reason. In Deuteronomy 12, he said, these are, verse 1, these are the statutes and judgments, the law, which you must observe to do. It's a must. There's no getting out of it. It's a must. And Yeshua said the same thing in Revelations 22:14, blessed are those that do Deuteronomy 12:1, for they have right to the tree of life. The tree of life is now offered again. It was offered once and it was turned down. It was taken away from mankind until Genesis 49 was the prophecies come true, come to be fulfilled. And I've explained that many times, so everyone should know that by now. We are the finishing. We're the seventh work on the seventh lampstand that was given to Moshe, the seven lampstand that was seen by Daniel, that was seen by Zechariah, that it was seen with the high priest and the man called the branch, the man. Remember those words because they all come into play when you're finding here a little and there a little, and you can find these answers then. In verse 2, he said, you must utterly destroy all the places where the nations you shall drive out worship their gods. Now, of course, the religions, they claim to follow this. And, of course, the nation Israel, they wanted a king so they could do this. But, they were taking one scripture out and saying we got to kill people. And there's nothing there for them to kill. There's nothing there that teaches killing or war or anything. In any of these things that he gave to Moshe to teach the people, there was not one single thing that told them to go to war. They're the ones that chose to go to war and do their own fighting. And they did this. And they chose kings, and then they went to fighting each other. Not just the ones that they thought they were supposed to kill and destroy. The way Yahweh put this thing together, they'd have to go by the prophecies to know this is going to be fulfilled in this generation. Not by us, not by power nor by might, not by destructive bombs. It's going to be destroyed by our teaching. By our teaching, we're going to bring this about. And 2 billion people are going to listen, and they're going to repent and start obeying. But it never was meant to be the way they did it. Everything they did was wrong. You stiff-necked and rebellious people, you always resist Yahweh's laws. Remember that Act 7? You always resist what Yahweh tells you, and you twist it around, and then you go off doing your own thing, and you get yourself in trouble. What we're doing is building a kingdom that's in unity, that can walk together with Yahweh. You can't walk together with Him unless you're in unity with Him. And the first thing the commandments teach you, don't kill, don't murder. He who lives by the sword, Yahshua said, is going to die by the sword. If the people who worship ISIS would just look around them at what they're doing, they could see this is not bringing peace. The destruction is getting worse every day. The bombs are getting bigger every day. And they even plan on making larger ones than what they got. This is their mindset. Well, you must destroy it. Yes, we must. But we got to do it the way Yahweh said. We can't pick up a gun and start killing people. They'll kill you. You'll die by the swords you picked up. We're the ones that's supposed to beat the swords into plowshares and the spears into pruning hooks. We're going to. You'll learn war no more. That's the teaching. It was the teaching right here in this book that Moshe was teaching these people, and they rejected it. Moshe offered Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, he offered them peace. He didn't offer them this righteousness in Egypt. You know, he offered them a land flowing with milk and honey. Well, of course, that's what the popes are offering too. Let's go in and kill all these people, take their land, we'll divide their wealth, we'll all be rich. That was the promise of the popes. Well, it's the same thing that Moshe offered the people and brought them out of Egypt. And you brought us out here offering us a land of milk and honey. You brought us to a desert and a tent where you could speak to us. Is that the milk and honey you're talking about? Yes, it was. That's the milk and honey. And if they'd have took it seriously and obeyed it, you know, there would have never been a war between the people, the 12 tribes of Israel. But Yahweh said in Genesis 49, you got to remember this. This is the way it's going to be, you stiff-necked and rebellious people. This is going to go out to all the nations. What is in you is going to go out to all the nations. You have the chance to go take it the other way. You could take this the other way, the peaceful way. But he says you're not going to do it. This is the way you're going to do it, because you're going to reject Yahweh. And Yahweh said, this won't be a part of my counsel. It'll never be a part of my counsel. My counsel is not by power, not by might, but by Yahweh's laws. Holy Spirit, or Spirit Holy, which is the laws of Yahweh. That's the Spirit that comes down from heaven. I hope I made that clear. I'll harp on it some more later. It includes Yahshua, that destroying these. Now we're preaching that you're going to destroy yourselves, and we can't stop that. We can't stop the nuclear wars from coming. Yahweh said they won't repent. They won't even repent of what they're doing now after they see so many killed and the land destroyed and everything. They won't even repent of that. That's what Revelations 9:21-22 showed. They won't repent of their pharmaceuticals. You saw the news. What's this is coming to in this time period now, right now as we live in this generation. They won't repent of that. But this plan included Yahshua and a bunch of donkeys who were in agreement with Yahshua and with Yahweh. And of course the donkeys, if you caught that today, that is so beautiful. And there's more to it than that, a lot more. It's almost endless. This number in Scripture and number in the plan of Yahweh and the birthdays. If you would You could, if you went to work right now, figuring up what Yahweh probably showed you in your birthday alone, you'd be for years. You could be doing that instead of lusting, after things that you don't really need. What is going to turn this thing around is the plan of Yahweh, and Yahweh plans that nothing is going to be restrained from them. And then the knowledge is going to be increased. The knowledge increased. Let's be turning over to Zechariah. But the knowledge would be increased, and the bombs would be made with that knowledge increase. Of course, there would be other things made with that knowledge increase also, and that's so the house of Yahweh could reach the world. I keep pushing our team, find me more ways. Find me more ways to reach the world. And, of course, they're working at it, and they're coming up with things almost daily that we are doing. We're putting it into action. The new study, the Yisrayl Says program. Brethren, that is the greatest thing on the face of the earth right now. You want to preach a sermon? Get that program. You can preach from that. You 24 hours a day for the rest of your life in that one single program. In Zechariah 4 and verse 6. Now, you should know these chapters here pretty much by heart right now. And it's speaking of the olive trees. It's speaking of what Revelations 11 speaks of, the two witnesses, the two olive trees, the two lampstands, because that's the finishing work of Yahweh. It's shown in chapter 10 of Revelations, when the seventh lampstand, when that seventh lampstand speaks. Yes, when that one speaks, then Yahweh's secrets are going to be revealed. And that there was no way, and this is what's going to destroy this mess that we see right now. We're changing the minds and hearts of the people. That's what is shown in Hebrews. Hebrews, with our high priest over the house of Yahweh, Hebrews 10:21. Verse 16 of that chapter says he's putting the laws of Yahweh in their minds and in their hearts. He's writing them there. Our high priest stands with us in this job that we're doing. Yes. And Yahweh says, I'm going to make your enemies your footstool. That's the plan. Before the earth was, He has this plan. And everything is going just exactly according to this plan, as He said in Yochanan 1:1. Well, here in Zechariah now, we see the lampstand spoken of, chapter 4, verse 2, the lampstands. And of course, Revelations 11, when it's speaking of the two witnesses, says this is the two lampstands. This is the two lampstands. This is the two olive trees. Somebody put as it were. I don't know why they added those words. It's better without it. This is the two lampstands. As it were, what are we, fairy telling? Back to Follywood or something? Why would we put that there? I didn't put it there. It got there, though. But this is how, as one of my sons brought out, the tricks of Satan, the power of Satan. She has a way of influence. And, of course, when unconverted people are not doing their jobs correctly, or they put themselves above the priest, then these mistakes or deliberate changes can take place. We're exposing them. That's our jobs, the priest's jobs. Yes. Well, chapter 4 now, and verse 6, he tells you how Deuteronomy 12:2 is going to take place. Is it war? You see anything there that would indicate that we would start bombing people, trying to kill people, when the commandment, one of the 10 commandments, says don't murder? Where could you ever get something like that in your mind? Well, that's the power of Satan, as the young priestess brought out. Yes, that's the power of Satan. if this was given in Genesis 1 also to the first two groups of people called trees. One priest was Abel, the other was Cain. And Satan had a way of sneaking in the teaching in the house of Yahweh, the tree of life, which is the house of Yahweh, also called the kingdom of Yahweh. She has a way of doing these things. Well, here now, he says, these are the two olive trees, the two lampstands, and then later down he calls it, verse 12, the two olive branches. Well, one died. We got the prophecy of that, so we know there's only one branch left. The man called the branch. The man called the branch. And you see that over in chapter 6, and where Yeshua is supporting this work, not a work that will kill and destroy, not a work that wants to murder or create bombs. I noticed on the news last night, they were showing between sex commercials. I don't know if anyone catches that but me. But I know some of you must, because it was pointed out to me. But I already knew it. But the next time, if you see this commercial, I always flip it off when I'm trying to watch the news, and I'll mash mute and turn my head. But they had this food advertised. Now let me show you how subtle Satan is. They had this food. I think it was a hamburger joint maybe, or a pizza joint, who delivered food. The man comes home. He had a Christian marriage, of course. Oh, that's a desirable thing. Oh, man, a Christian marriage. Here comes the bride down the hall, down the aisleway with a long white dress, which is supposed to represent righteousness. I don't know what the cleavage was supposed to represent. Would you? Would anyone know what that might represent? And all the lustful eyes watching her. Hey, can I kiss the bride? Can I kiss the bride? Some people at that moment would take out a gun, probably, if they carried it to the wedding. Well, the man comes home. There's no supper. The man is hungry. The house is a mess. It's a wreck. And she has her hand handcuffed to her diaper or something and making excuses why she couldn't take care of her family. The next scene was the wife and the children were sitting at the table, and here comes the delivery man through the door, knocks on the door. The husband answers the door. The man wasn't even looking at the man that answered the door. He's looking at his wife sitting at the table and smiling, really big time. And the wife winks at him. The husband turns just in time to see the wife wink at the delivery man and says, "Oh, no." And the expression on his face, I felt it myself. Well, this is the Christian marriage. This is what creates wars. Christian marriages creates wars. Yakishka, 14. Well, this is the plan for Satan. This is how the marriages go. But Yakishka, 14 and verse 13. 14 and verse 13. When you come to the house, brethren, you start early by making vows. You're anxious to get into Yahweh's house. You love it. And you start making your vows, and you're baptized. What do you think those vows mean? When you come here, this is the love of your life. When you first find out, hey, Yahweh is watching me. I want to be righteous like the rest of these people. My love is right here. Does it make any difference what age you are? When we baptize you, we question you fully, don't we? And you make a vow to Yahweh that you love Him more than all else. All else. Yosef did. Yosef was used to extent in Egypt to bring back the children of Israel out of Egypt. He was used by Yahweh. How old was he? Well, he's a younger brother, very young. They say his other brothers sold him. They couldn't send him because they knew that he was righteous and was prophesied to succeed. And they hated him. They could have been a part of this great work, but they hated what that man stood for. Satan put in front of him a queen and said, a queen that was probably taught the ways of Yahweh, and she wanted this man teaching her, and he was there daily teaching her, but he refused her advances. You surely remember all this. These things are written for our benefit. And either one of these things, these little things, they can turn your head and you'll start lusting and you'll wonder, well, why am I here? Why was I baptized? In Yechezkel 14, Son of man, when the sins of earth have reached their peak, brethren, they are here. The sins of earth are the worst that I've ever seen. When I was born in 1934, all the women kept their bodies covered. They didn't wear revealing dresses. They didn't walk down the hall getting married in a revealing dress. All of this came from Follywood, who's owned by the Catholic Church. When you expose your bodies, man or woman, which they do this on television, when you expose it and you sit there and you watch this or on television, this comes into your mind and it's something you can't stop. Once you let it in, you can't stop it. Then you've got to start fighting to get it out again. You should have gotten it out to begin with and set your mind on studying Yahweh's way. And then I wouldn't even have to be explaining it to you. I wouldn't have to tell you, no, a gun is not the answer. A bomb is not the answer. This is crazy to think that Yahweh wants us to destroy these religions physically. He wants us to teach righteousness. He wants us to set the example of righteousness. Yes, be in unity with Him, not with Follywood. Son of man, when the sins of the earth have reached their peak, their full measure, I will stretch out my hand against it. This is mistranslated, of course. Satan made Yahweh look bad and made it look like Yahweh was causing this. It's translated perfectly altogether different from that Yahweh has prophesied that it's going to be dealt a hand by themselves that's against them. And they're bringing it on themselves. They'll be cut off. Its supply of bread. The supply of bread will be cut off. Did you know that's occurring? Did you know that's occurring in the fourth part of the earth, in and around the great river Euphrates right now? You know why America is protected? Surely, if you just think, you could be dwelling on this instead of lust. You could be dwelling on this instead of watching a stupid television show that fills your mind with craziness, with evil like the gods. Shut off the supply of bread. We're in it. We're at the peak of sin right now, brought about by Follywood and the Catholic Church, the Vatican that sits on 7 hills. I didn't count them. I didn't put that in Revelation. That's going to be destroyed along with the earth in 1 hour. 1 hour. How could Yahweh know it's going to be 1 hour? And write it down for you. And why would He? hoping that you would see this and see the power of Yahweh and the real might of Yahweh, which is His laws, statutes, and judgments, that will turn this thing around, where there will be no more war. And He said, bread will be cut off, send famine upon it, cut off man and beast. Though these three men, Noah, Daniel, and Eob, were in it, they would deliver only themselves. By how? By what? By breaking your vows? Oh, how could I ever believe you again if you break your vows? How could Yahweh ever believe you again? And they asked me, well, what do I do now? I said, try sackcloth and ashes. That's what I did. Sackcloth and ashes. Try it. Weep and mourn. When you get these feelings of breaking your vows to Yahweh that you made when you were baptized, the rest of everything else came later. When you give an elder or a counselor your word, and you say, I'm going to abide by this, and you didn't, try some sackcloth and ashes, and let your counselor see it too. But main thing is let Yahweh see your heart, and see if it's sincere this time, or are you a liar that nobody can trust forever? Your counselors can save your life, but if you don't allow them to, they won't. If you lie to them, people come and they lie to cover up their actions. You can't lie to Yahweh. Yahweh knew before you were born this very thing. What He wants to do now is see what you're going to do. Your counselors will tell you what to do. I'm telling you now. You need some sackcloth and ashes and true repentance. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next speaker. I love you!